So good morning, the early birds in Australia. Good evening, the Europeans, and the Americans. Enjoy your lunch. So this is the some of the key procedures using the LEOMO IMU technology. I'll just do like a pretty quick intro, and I'm going to try and run this presentation in the sense where you get to see a bit of the LEOMO files on the online LEOMO app to have a better understanding. Now, with LEOMO, we have our own special metrics. So it's very different to the normal fitting procedures that traditionally happens. We do non-static measurements. So all our measurements are measuring in motion in the lab and in the real outdoor environment. It's portable with long battery, which means we can do really good analyzing of in races or long training and see the effect of what happens to bike positions, throughout the race or throughout trainings in different environments. The sensors can be used for anything you can think of. Now, I threw this in here because you can be very creative with this technology. If you can think of outside of the box, you can do things your own way. We're not really pushing to do it, our way or this is the way. One of my favorite things with the LEOMO is, capturing a rider's position for multiple bikes. So if a rider has multiple bikes and he's really happy with his position, we can use the LEOMO's metrics. We can capture his pelvic angle, leg angle range, foot angle range. Depending on the type of seat, we can see how much movement is in the pelvic with pelvic rotation, pelvic rock, and we can make it exactly the same. And the whole point, what I really like about this is, instead of making the bikes the same, we make the rider the same on every bike. And this is actually important if you're doing a fit in a studio and you're using a special rig that's adjustable. And what you want to do is when you fit the rider ideally on that rig, you want him to actually, or her, to actually have the exact same position on their bike. The other thing with the LEOMO, because the accelerometers and the gyros and the sensors, not only do we measure the joint angle ranges in the sense where the higher the leg angle range or the lower leg angle range, we can actually measure what actually happens in between. And this gets pretty, it's very exciting. I like this feature here. And last, we have a new feature coming out, which is capturing a baseline. So we can capture a certain position, and I'll be using like holding a TT position as an example. So first, I'm just going to bring up, this is the LEOMO online app file. So this is just a ramp test. It's pretty standard in the teams. And I thought this would be a good way for me to explain the MPIs of LEOMO. So just an introduction to the file. So there's a bit of a warm up here, and then it's 5 minutes every 40 watts. And you can see I've actually marked intervals in every stage, and then this is where the rider cracked. So here we got your foot angle range Q1. So this is the angle difference of the foot in the Q1, which is from 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock. The foot angle range without the Q1 is for the whole rotation of the pedal stroke. Then we have the leg angle range. So it measures the difference between the top and the bottom of the leg angle. We have the pelvic angle. So that's how much the actual pelvic is rotated. Now, with this pelvic angle, we actually place the sensor on the sacrum. And this is very specific. So when you have a 3D mapping system that puts a point on the side of the hip to measure how the hip reacts, this is not so exact, because what I've seen is, you have riders that have muscle there. It's very hard to find the point. And when the riders are pedaling, that point moves quite a lot, where this is a real true measurement of the pelvic angle. We have the pelvic rock. So that's when the pelvic is rocking and on a vertical way. And then the pelvic rotation is how the pelvic rotates more on a horizontal way. Now, if you scroll further down in the LEOMO online app, you'll see all the data gets recorded. And because I did lap times in every single step, you can see there was a bit of a warm up, and then there was 130 watts and an incline. Now, what's the first thing, it's a lot of numbers, but it measures really everything. And if it's too much from the start, what I always like to say is, if metrics deviate, then this does not equals good. And you can see in this particular file here, where when I'm riding at an easy tempo, I don't exactly have the same LAR. And as the intensity picks up, I actually improve my LAR, and I'm actually riding at a very consistent and stable LAR. The problem is I have with myself, because this is my RAM test, that when the intensity picks up, and you see it, this is the red is the power. And just to be clear, at the top, the blue is the cadence, red is the power, pink is the heart rate. As the power increases, you can see my FAR deviates quite a lot. And this is one of the benefits with the LEOMO technology that we have, that because we can measure not only in the lab, out of the lab, also in longer rides, we can capture a lot more data and the exact moment when it happens. So I can actually see here directly where the deviation starts to appear, where I have problems within myself, at what power and when it happens. So what I've done is I've just chopped up the photos here to put everything together, just so we can see the difference. And we're just looking at FAR, so this is because that's the problem that I had with this file. So you can see when I started, it was just, it's just a slight difference. So this is left leg, this is right leg. And then here, at 170 watts, you see like a 3% difference. Here you see a 4% degree difference. And then here it really changes, starts to change here. So you see an 8-degree difference, and then it goes 10%, 10 degrees difference, 14 degrees difference here. And then as I fade off, they come back together. Now, not only this happens in the FAR and the foot, depending of the rider. In this example here, it actually happened in the leg angle range. So this is the leg angle range here, and you see quite a bit of deviation. And this is the gray line's the elevation, and you can see that it happens on the hills. Sorry that I put these images above it, but this happens on the hills. And you can see quite a difference. And this is really interesting because the blue, which is the balance of a power meter, so this is the percentage of where the power goes from the left side to the right side. And 49.7 on the left to 50.3 is a very good balance for a rider. But you can see that just looking at the leg angle range difference, the body is doing something totally different to achieve the 50-50% power. And this is what we can detect with the motion sensors with the LEOMO. Now, just going on, we're looking at like leg angle range over like a static test, and this is Philip Gilbert, and I know he's not exactly at 6 o'clock position with his pedal stroke, but your traditional bike fit, what they do is they get you at the 6 o'clock, they make your foot horizontal to the ground, and they mark the reading of your seat height basically from a starting point here. And this doesn't really work for every rider. If you look at the next rider, this is Rowan Dennis. As you can see that he actually has quite an angle in his foot. And if you were to follow the same pattern, you would actually have to drop his seat angle, his seat down. And what we do is we actually measure leg angle range. So everyone rides different on the bike. And what we try and do is we try and balance it and use our metrics to find what works best for the rider. I've used this example in the past, and I like to show it quite a lot. This is myself riding on my Ridley Helium. The position is exactly the same on the left to the right side. The only difference is I'm sitting upright as I'll be riding the bunch or climbing, and this is a more aggressive position where I'm sitting more forwards. If I was to zoom in on the seating area here and the seating area upright, there's quite a bit difference of where you sit on the bike. So when I'm sitting more upright, I have a more relaxed position and my pelvic angle is at 65.7 degrees, which is the green line. And when I sit more forwards, I'm actually more rotated forwards and my pelvic angle is reduced to 62.2 degrees. Also, because I'm sitting forwards, I'm closer to the bottom bracket. And that means my leg angle range changes. And you see it with the data. So when I'm upright, I have 53.1 on my left leg. And on my left leg, on the more aggressive and sitting more forwards, I have 49.4 degrees. So there is quite a bit of a difference. And this is, you know, one of the things I always like to say, that what you do in the lab, you might test this more sitting upright, but what happens in the real world is something very different. And the difference between the leg angle ranges is quite dramatic. I always like to start at the pelvic, and I'm a big believer of having a stable pelvic on the bike. And the biggest problem we have is with seats. So to find the right seat for someone, I think is, you know, there's many different methods, but what I've found with my own personal experience working with different riders is that whatever fits them right, whatever they feel comfortable with, is the ultimate seat. And I'm just going to bring up a few different seats and the problems of having bike measurement jigs to work out if, you know, if a rider's changing the different seat. And this is always a starting point for if I'm fitting a rider, if I'm fitting myself, it's where to start with. So with this particular seat, the red line going straight through it horizontally, this is the center of the seat. So if you measure from the start to the end, this is the actual center. The blue line is the widest part of the seat. So a lot of mechanics use the blue line to measure the seat height, or they measure the center of the seat. And the green line is the actual dip in the seat. A lot of seat manufacturers say that's where you're meant to be sitting at that point. Now, if you look at a different seat, I've tried to match up the blue line together. You can see the green line, which is the dip, the lowest point is actually a little bit behind, and the center of the seat is, you know, dramatically more forwards. So if a rider wants to change his seat, it's a lot more complicated than just putting the seat on and measuring it. Because if you were to measure from the center of the seat and mark up the red line, then the actual dip where the rider is meant to be sitting, or if the rider sits at the widest point, it can be very different. And here's just, I threw in another example, this one down below. It is a dead flat seat. There's no dip in the seat, and you can see that the widest point is dramatically different to the first example. Now, to me, the pelvic angle is far more important than where the seat is and the seat angle. And when you're putting someone on a bike, or you know a bit of experience from the rider, if you know the pelvic angle, and if you know how the pelvic rock is and the pelvic rotation of the rider, if you can capture the same and have them on the new seat or the new position, this is more important than the actual height of the seat and the actual angle of the seat. And I'll just show something that I found that really surprised me, and also how I said how you can use the sensors in entirely different ways than the standard procedure. So if you find the seat that fits you and you're comfortable with that, and the first thing to do is, okay, you want your pelvic angle to be the same on both of the bikes. So if you change the seat, you measure the pelvic angle, and if you have a new seat, you put the seat on and then you're measuring the pelvic angle. Now, there's many different ways to measuring it, like I said before. The most standard procedure is just putting a flat board on it and working out the percentage. So here I just put an iPad on the seat, and this measures just the two highest points of the saddle. So there's one at the front and at the back, and the iPad's flat, and I put a LEOMO sensor on top, and I've just, you know, I've used the pelvic angle sensor, and it's at 6.9 degrees. And here's another example just from a top view so you see it a bit directly. But what what I always wondered is why is when a mechanic will build a bike for a rider and he's convinced it's exactly the same as a previous bike, because riders have, you know, we have a light bike for climbing, we have an aero bike for on the flat, and the seat posts are different. You have aero seat posts, you have offset, the frames have different geometry in them. And if you just use a frame jig or a levering device like this to measure the seat angle, there's always riders saying, nah, but it just feels different. So what I did was, is, in this example, I put a LEOMO sensor underneath the seat. And it's at 8.5 degrees here. So this is not the actual angle of the seat, it's just the angle of the LEOMO sensor placed on the seat. So it's still 8.5. I'm sitting, well, I'm actually put all my weight onto the pedals. I'm not actually sitting on the seat yet. But with my particular seat, when I sit down, it flexes to 10.6 degrees, which is 2.1 degrees difference. And in LEOMO's terms, that's actually, that's a big difference in your pelvic angle. So I always suggest, you know, if you change a seat or you have a different type of seat post, or if you're fitting a rider in a studio on a bike that's fully adjustable, and then you capture that position with a bike jig, for example, and you're trying to match the bikes the same to how the rider is fitted to that jig, what you can do with the LEOMO system is actually capture the rider and how the rider moves on the jig or on the bike with the different seat or different seat post. And the whole idea is to make sure the rider is doing the exact same movement on the previous bike or the rig that you use to set up the rider to his new bike, because that's the ultimate goal. You don't want, you know, two bikes actually fitted in the jig the same. You want the rider to be riding exactly on both of the bikes. And if you question, you know, okay, the flex of the saddle because, or the seat post because it's sloping the wrong way or something like this, 2.1 degrees is quite a lot. We're releasing this baseline capture feature in the future. It should be the first week of February or mid-February. And what we're doing is with our LEOMO device is when a rider rides, we can capture all the data as a baseline. So in this example, we did a little test with one rider. So is holding an optimal position same as holding optimal watts? So in this example, we're just looking at pelvic angle, and we created a baseline, only took 31 seconds, 66.6 degrees for this particular rider of his pelvic angle. We had the baseline feature turned off, and this particular rider rode till exhaustion at VO2 max. And he was able to do it for 3 minutes and 54 seconds at 361 watts. Then we had the baseline feature turned on. And with the baseline feature turned on, if you deviate past what you've set the baseline at, and you can adjust how much past each metric, it'll actually change color on the display on the head unit. And the goal in this test here was for the rider to keep his pelvic angle above 66 degrees. And he was able to ride 4 minutes and 33 seconds at VO2 max till exhaustion, which is actually a 12.5% improvement in duration. So it's just something very small that can change quite a lot. And the biggest difference is when baseline feature was turned off, he was actually changing his position by changing the pelvic angle, and it was reduced to 64.6. So this is with the baseline feature turned off, and this is the readout. You see his pelvic angle was 64.6, and you can see it a bit sloping a little. And this also shows how sensitive the LEOMO is. These little bumps here, and I know this particular rider always slips forwards on his saddle and kicks himself back up. It's very typical for time trialists too, when they're, you know, riding in their extreme position, and what they're doing is they're just kicking themselves back up every can be, we tested some riders, can be every 30 seconds, 1 minute, happens quite a lot. A lot of riders use sandpaper or they use different material on the seats to sort of hold in that position, but we can actually detect every single time that happens. And a lot of times when that does happen, you see the legs react. So these are the little deviations here is every time he major moves on the saddle. Now with baseline feature turned on, you do see that it's far more flat line in the pelvic angle. And that's how it should be. And that's just looking at one metric and to making sure that he was able to hold it and to improve his duration for 12.5%. So the example I gave before, that small movement can make a big difference. And this is what we actually want to do. We want to be able to, what we do in the lab is test it, capture it, and make sure the rider performs the exact same movement on the road. And I'm not saying this is a bad position here, but this position here should also be tested. Now, the first thing to do is getting the data right. I've done a lot of bike fits, and what I've noticed is you have the fitter, he actually says, okay, go, and then you ride for a certain period of time, and then he says stop, and then you try and get everything right for that particular capture that he was doing. So for me, I'm going to show you how I get, the most accurate data as possible. I don't let the rider decide, what is the most accurate data is. I let the data decide. I eliminate all the noise within the data captured. And sometimes you do see a rider shift a little, and I want to eliminate that because you want the most exact data as possible. And the more precise the data is, the more precise the fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you just a quick collection that I did. So here's just a training file, and this is the LEOMO online app. So it was just under 25 minutes. I actually did a little warm up here, and then there was a capture here, 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 here. So 7 captures. Now I've marked them already. This section I haven't marked. Okay, and once again, cadence is the blue, red is the power, and then pink is the heart rate. So every moment I do a capture, there's actually 3 recordings. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight this section here and just give a quick demonstration. So you can see that at the start, I'm riding a pretty stable wattage here. And then I changed the gear, and this was done on a 11-speed cassette trainer on a 12-speed bike. So it was a bit of difficulty just changing the gear. But once the gear was changed, it was all stable and everything was good here. Now you do see some other changes where if you look at the pelvic angle, it's pretty flat. And you can see here that I actually go into my drops. So what this actual capture was is I rode pretty easy in the hoods. I actually did a little bit more intensity, and then I went in the drops. When you change your pelvic angle, so when you go in your hoods to your drops, you do see there's a bit of movement, and I call this noise, in the leg area. You also see here there's a slight movement in the pelvic angle. So there was a bit of adjustment on the saddle here, and because when there's adjustment on the saddle, your legs do some funny things. Sometimes when the bike shorts, then they're not put on properly at the start or something like that, you just readjust, you throw a knee out, you can see the movement here. So with this capture here, there's actually 3 different captures I'm doing. And just to get the data exactly right, what I want to do is I want to measure from here to here, because that's where I stopped. And you can see it's very stable. So if I just select this section here, that is nice clean data there. And once that's selected, if you scroll down in the app, this is the selected data. And that's the section where I captured in the drops. So I've saved that. I'm going to click on all to see the whole file, scroll back up. And you can see that I've just captured that part there exactly. I'm going to highlight it again. And these lines here was the interval I just selected. And now I want an interval also in the hoods. So I want it clean, just before the pelvic rotation, so there's no noise. And this is medium riding. And I select all, so I can have the full file showing. And then I now want to start with the easy section. And this is what I mean by, making sure that you select the data, not the rider, because if you just start it and stop it with the traditional system, or if you don't do it, if you don't look at the data before, you're actually capturing this noise here that does affect the results in the final. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just capture just after this leg movement, this little slight pelvic movement to get the most cleanest noise. Sorry, the cleanest data without the noise. And this is the easy part of the writing. And down below, I did a lot of captures. So if you scroll across, you see them all. Just give you a quick look at that. So, and if I just click all, so you see all the whole file. So I actually did 7 captures of 3 different captures within. So within 25 minutes, I was able to capture 21 different bike positions. Riding in the hood's easy, riding the hoods in medium tempo, and then riding medium tempo in the drops. At the end, you get a whole bunch of data. Now, for the people that never used LEOMO before, this can get over your head a little, but I'll try and explain it the best as possible. For me personally, I think the most important thing is to have the most stable pelvis on the bike. And we can use pelvic rotation, pelvic rock. And this is 5 different captures, and I've labeled them at the top. So we've got 25 millimeters down, easy, medium, drop, just like what you saw in the previous file. This is another setting at 12.5 millimeters easy, medium, drop. This is pretty much the baseline of the rider when they came in. And here's a plus 12.5 millimeters easy. So this is the seat going a little bit higher, medium, drop, and then 25 millimeters easy. Now I've used pretty large numbers in this test just to dramatically show the difference, but just to make it a bit more aware for the viewers of this webinar. Now just looking at the pelvic rotation, the pelvic rock, just from the first reading, if you look at the numbers, we have a pelvic rotation of 12.7, 12.1, 13.2, and the pelvic rock in those positions with 2.8, 2.8, 2.5. Now, if we look at the next position, just compare it. The next position is a clear winner. The ride is far more stable when the seat is a little bit lower. And what generally happens is when the seat is too high, the rider will reach down and he will try and reach for the pedals. And we see this with the pelvic movement quite a lot. A lot of if you have trouble understanding this, if you're familiar with another company called GBIMIZE with the pressure mapping system, they run on pretty much the same theory on detecting if a saddle is too high or not with the pressure. And we can see it also in the same lines as with the rock and the rotation. Now, if I compare this reading here to the reading that they actually originally came in, the pelvic rotation and pelvic rock was actually better with the position they came in. You saw it 8.8, 8.4, 8.6 compared to 11.2, 11.3, 11.9. Also, the pelvic rock was reduced at the same time. And if you just compare it to a little bit lower, the numbers are even better than the original baseline that they came in. So everything was reduced. And if we compare it to a too low seat, there was more movement in the pelvic rotation and more movement in the pelvic rock. Not much, but you see it also. And every rider has their sweet spot where they're meant to ride. Now, these are pretty dramatic jumps. So if I was to retest this rider, I would actually more test in the center between the two positions here on the seat height. The other thing I would look for more for is with the leg angle range. And if we look at these two positions, just comparing the leg angle range. So this is the left leg, right leg of the easy section, the medium section, and then the drops. You see that they're pretty close together. And the idea is to have the rider as high as possible without having too much pelvic rotation, pelvic rock. So the rider's not reaching for the pedal. He's not overextending. He's not putting strain on his knee. And this is why I really like to see if the pelvis is stable. Now, everyone's got everyone has different flexibility and different mobility in their range. So everyone's going to show different numbers, but you'll be able to see a trend within the rider. And if you have a training file of the rider, if the rider has a LEOMO system and you send them out on a bike rider before the fit, you get even more data, but you get a lot of data, even their warm up, how they move on the bike, or the assessment you do before. And there's always a balance. You're not going to get every metric to be perfect. And you have to decide, do you want to have more of a leg angle range to have a bit more movement in the pelvis? But with these two examples here, I would really do another test down the center, which is here. So in this here, I would probably go back and I'd probably do another three measurements or 4 between these two, which you could easily do. There's a good 12.5 millimeters difference between the two positions, and you could fine tune it and get the rider even better stable on the bike. What I really like about this type of testing and this with the LEOMO is what I found is when you go to a lot of bike fitters and when people do tests, they already have in the back of the idea where they want the rider to go. And what I always left, because I've been fitted so many times, I've worked with a lot of athletes, also fitting them to bikes. What I've seen when I fit riders, and especially my experience being fitted, is I don't want to walk out knowing, yeah, but what happens if I would have tried that position, or maybe if I try a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And doing measurements like this, you're not being biased. You're measuring everything, and you're just following where the data is trying to point you. If you want to be more forwards on the bike or more back on the bike, depending on the seat, you can also look at pelvic rotation, pelvic rock. And in this webinar, I'm not going to touch on moving seat forwards or back. That'll be in the next one. But you can see if the rider is able to ride that position. Some riders are less flexible at the start of the season, towards the end of the season, and you'll see that the pelvic rotation, pelvic rock will improve. And if they can improve, then they should be able to adapt to a higher position. Or if they do have problems, then they should have their seat lowered. And this is one of the major benefits. Now, if you want to take things a step further, we have the LVS, and the LVS looks at the raw data of the files. So this is Victor Campanats, and this is him on his BMC. We're doing data capture with him, and we're trying to imitate the exact same position from his Ridley to his BMC bike. And this is the top of the stroke, and this is the bottom of the stroke. So when you're looking at joint angle ranges, they just see the top to the bottom. But with our accelerometer technology, we're able to see what the leg does between the stroke. And this is very important. This is a deceleration of the leg. If you have a look, I'll just play it again. And you can control this by the speed. And this is at 240 frames per second. What actually happens is when he rotates down, he has a bit of ankling, and you see it directly. Now, if we turn the gyro X on, now we're only seeing the accelerometer Z on the thigh, but if we turn the gyro X on, we'll be able to see that his foot's rotating too much. And this is something we want to try and avoid. And this is when you go more advanced to see how fluid the rider is. And this can be seen very easily with the LVS system. Victor on his Ridley. So this is his world hour record bike, a setup, same bike. You can see at the top of the stroke to the bottom of the stroke again, it is almost perfect. It is so fluid. He is so efficient on this bike, this setup, a lot better than his road bike. And I'm just showing one metric. So once again, this is the accelerometer on his right knee. So top of the stroke to the downstroke, there's no ankling. It is very fluid and very smooth, and it's 100% power transfer. There's no loss into that. We have this new baseline feature, which I've spoken about, but I really want to show you the importance of it. So as you know, TT riders, they train something very specific, which is the aerodynamic position. And what they're trying to do is we call the shoulder tuck position. Both Rowan and Victor they hold these positions quite a lot in training. And the whole idea is to keep your shoulders as narrow as possible. And when your shoulders are narrow as possible, you can be far more aerodynamic. And you really have to hold this and train this. This is not something that you can just get told and you can just do it. Because while you're racing, you think you're holding the position, but you're really not holding the position. So this is just a very small example of me using this is the Type S. So I'll just explain what I'm doing. So this is data screens. I'm adding a new data screen here. I'm just picking one. I only want one metric. Pick the MPI of LEOMO, and I'm going to use pelvic angle as the MPI. So I click pelvic angle display. That's all I want showing. So I play, so it's playing, takes a while for the sensors to kick in. So the sensors kicked in. So here's the sensor here on the left, and you'll see when I hold it vertically, it's almost 90. When I hold it horizontally, it's almost 0. I can never hold it level as much as I try, but it's just to show. So hold it vertically, it goes up to 90 almost, and hold it horizontally goes through. So this is me, this is sensor. Now I'm just showing that the two videos in time sync. So now I'm putting in front of the camera and the Type S to show horizontally should go almost to 0. Back up to 90. Now, I'm pretty excited about this because this is Time Trialer's dream. Now, when you get these sensors, you get stickers so you can place them on your body. So I'm just putting one sticker on this sensor, and I'm just gonna tuck it just between my shoulder blade and my spine. You can feel it when you put your shoulder up. I've actually taken a photo of afterwards. That's exactly where the sensor is in its position. And what I'm going to do is just doing a capture. So this is the most aerodynamic position when your shoulders are in and you sort of got that tuck. And you see that the angle holds pretty good. Now, when shoulders come out, you see the angle changes. Shoulders in, goes back higher. Shoulders out, shoulders in, drop your shoulders where your head goes up. But that's not a true head, that's more of your body going up. So I'm just going to pause it here. This is so what I've done now is I've just displayed how moving the shoulders, with the sensors, you can be creative, you can try different things. You don't have to follow the particular path we're going on, and you can really think out of the box. So what I've done in this example here, I've just put one on my back to measure if I'm doing the shoulder tuck position, and I can see it exactly, every time I move my shoulders apart, because the biggest problem is when you do, for an example, the SRM indoor track testing for aerodynamics, you ride on the track and you have an aerodynamic specialist there, and he would tell you, okay, you have to be in the shoulder tuck position, which is this one here, and you think you're holding it. You do your race and you think you're doing it, but as you fatigue, you're actually slowly deviating. And then, you get to a moment of race, you go, no, I got to be in, so you be in. And with this, we can actually see exactly when you come out of that position. Now, with the shoulder tuck position, I'll just play it to that moment. What I did is I captured it, created a baseline, and now I've marked off. So I've put the barriers where I want it, because when you're racing, you don't want to look at angles. And with the baseline feature, what we're having is the actual display will change depending where you put the ranges. Now I've put the ranges pretty high in this example, but this can be set with your pelvic angle, pelvic rotation, pelvic rock, your leg angle range, foot angle range, your dead spot score and everything. And you can have the borders very close. But here, as you see, when the shoulders come out, it turns blue. And that's all the rider wants to see, just a change of color. Shoulders go in, goes black. Yep, this is a good position. Slowly deviates. If I go up, changes dramatically to blue again, goes in. Yep, good position, goes black. Shoulders out, blue. Shoulders back in, black. Very simple for a rider. Now I'm very excited about this because this is I think a real killer feature. At the moment, it's just changing color on the head unit. We have a watch that can connect also to the device where you can see it on the watch. And what I'm pushing for is the actual head unit to vibrate, which means in the future, you have tactical feedback of this just underneath your skin suit. And every time you deviate from your aerodynamic position, the head unit will vibrate, and it's very small and smaller than a radial. And you have the feedback that you've actually deviated from your time trial position. And you can stay more aerodynamic. So I've just very briefly touched on a few of the advantages that I see with the LEOMO and the accelerometer and gyro technology that we have in the sensors, how it can be used in the bike fit, how it can be used to capture a rider's position, how it can be, if you're having a rider and you want him to ride the exact same on one bike to another bike, you can capture his position on one bike and make sure he holds the exact same position on the new bike with the different saddle or the different seat height or the different seat post or seat. Or if you're doing a bike fit your own way with your own system and you just want to see the data from that rider and make sure he's doing the exact same thing onto his bike. And then what you want to see is if he can actually do it on the road outside and if he can do it in the race. So that's that's part one. There will be a part two coming. We haven't got a date yet set, but I'm going to speak to Furu, our man in charge. Hopefully it'll be in about 1 month, where I'll be showing other features and other ways using the LEOMO Type R and the Type S for, better fitting yourself to a bike. You have our support email. If you have any questions, please send to support@leomo.io. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. If you have any requests, please contact LEOMO on social media or on the email or me through social media. And if you have any some tests that you'd like us to do or something you would like in future webinars, please reach out because we all love this stuff. Thanks for coming, and hopefully next time. See you guys.